I always thought love was about trust. But then I found her, mesmerized by a billionaire's charm, laughing in a mansion I actually owned. Every touch, every whisper, they thought they were untouchable. They couldn't see me, but I was there. And karma? Karma doesn't forget. Before we dive in, hit that like button, share this story. Subscribe for more shocking true stories of betrayal and revenge. I used to think life had a simple rhythm work. Home. Quiet nights, but then she walked in wearing that smile that could make anyone forget reason. Her name is Lyra Thorne, and from the moment I met her, I thought I understood love. I thought I could protect it, nurture it, treasure it. I never imagined that the person I trusted most would be the one to betray me. She wasn't cruel. Not in the obvious way. She was just dazzled. Dazzled by everything I didn't have, by everything I hadn't yet shown her. She wanted the world, and the world had started showing her someone else. It started small. A call she left unanswered for hours, a lipstick stain on a scarf I didn't recognize. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was letting suspicion twist my love into something ugly. But love doesn't blind you forever. It sharpens the edges when betrayal lingers beneath. And the more I tried to convince myself that she was faithful, the more I noticed how she lingered on stories of billionaires, high society events, and the glittering lights of mansions she thought were untouchable. The kind of life she spoke about with yearning, I already owned. I had the keys, the titles, the calm control, yet she never saw me for what I truly had. There's a strange weight that comes with knowing secrets others cannot even imagine. I watched her fall in love with a world that I could give her in an instant, yet she craved it elsewhere. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a misunderstanding of trust, a dance of greed and curiosity that she thought was harmless. And then came the first undeniable proof. A photograph of her laughing at a rooftop dinner wrapped around the arms of a man whose wealth made him a god in her eyes. She didn't see me there, standing in the shadow of the building she adored, quiet, watching, knowing. The anger didn't hit immediately. No, it simmered, slow and deliberate, like a storm forming behind the calmest sky. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't understood before. Karma isn't just a word you whisper. It's patience. It's quiet. It's waiting for the perfect moment to turn the tables. She thought she was untouchable, floating in someone else's illusion of power. She couldn't see that I had been closer than she ever imagined, that the very mansion where she believed she belonged was mine. And just like that, the first threads of a plan began to weave themselves in my mind. Not out of cruelty, not for malice, but for justice, for balance. It wasn't dramatic at first. No shouting, no confrontations, just small, almost imperceptible shifts in her behavior. I began noticing the way she would glance at her phone a little too often, the way her eyes sparkled when she mentioned the newest gala or the latest mansion party. She never realized I saw it all. I watched her from across the room, pretending to be absorbed in my own work, while a cold knot formed in my chest. The more I pretended not to notice, the more the puzzle pieces started to align, the clearer it became that she was slipping away. She spoke about him often, though never by name. Her words dripped with fascination, excitement, longing. I could hear it in the tone of her voice, the way her laughter grew lighter, the way her gaze lingered somewhere I couldn't reach. At first I wanted to call her out, to demand the truth, but I stayed silent. I needed to know how deep this went, to feel the weight of her desire for a life she imagined, not the life she had beside me. Every delayed response, every vague explanation, every just friend she offered felt like a stone dropped into my stomach. I started piecing together the patterns, the times she went out for work, the dinners that weren't really dinners, the social media posts that didn't quite match reality. I replayed conversations in my head, noticing the little hints I had missed before. She thought she was subtle. She thought I was blind, but I wasn't. I wasn't blind, and I wasn't powerless. I began imagining him in my spaces, walking through my hallways, unaware that the foundations beneath him belonged to me. That thought alone made my blood boil, but also made me calm, strangely calm. There was a perverse thrill in knowing the truth and watching her unknowingly dance toward it. Every smile she gave him, Every moment of delight she thought was secret was a step she took right into my plan. I couldn't interfere too early. I had to let it unravel naturally, let her choices build the story of her own undoing. Watching her, I felt betrayal, but I also felt clarity. I knew what had to happen next. I knew the mansion, the glamour, the glittering life she craved was the very stage where she would meet her reckoning. And I would be there quiet, patient, and fully in control. And then he appeared. Lucien Vey, the man whose charm was magnetic, whose wealth seemed to radiate like a second skin. I didn't need to meet him to understand the power he carried. She did that for me every time she spoke about him, every time her eyes lit up in fascination. There was a gravity about him, a confidence that demanded attention, and she was drawn in like a moth to the flame. Watching her, I felt a strange mixture of anger, envy, and cold calculation. I wasn't just hurt, this was a game of illusions. I knew the rules she didn't. I remember the first time I saw them together. She was laughing, leaning just slightly closer than necessary. Her hand brushing his arm with a subtle intimacy she thought went unnoticed. But I noticed everything. The mansion behind them gleamed under the lights, its elegance, its luxury mine. Every glass, every chandelier, every velvet chair belonged to me. Yet she thought this world was his, and he was untouchable. I felt my pulse steady, a quiet storm settling in my chest. There was no panic, no desperate confrontation, only the deliberate awareness that I had all the power. Her fascination was almost painful to watch. The way she whispered compliments, the way she mirrored his movements, the way she laughed louder when he did small details, easily dismissed by anyone else, but impossible for me to ignore. Every second she spent wrapped up in his illusion drove a sharpened edge into my mind. I realized then that this wasn't just a crush. A fleeting desire, this was a deep obsession. A surrender to a fantasy she believed she couldn't have without him. And I, who could provide everything, was invisible. Yet I didn't move, I didn't expose, I didn't interfere. There was a perverse satisfaction in knowing the truth while she remained blind. She thought she was winning. She thought she was stepping into a glamorous world. But in reality, she was stepping into my house, into my control, into a trap she couldn't see. The tension was exquisite. Anger simmered beneath my calm exterior. Betrayal sharpened into focus, and patience became my weapon. I watched, I calculated, and I knew that the moment of reckoning would come. Perfectly timed, and it would hit harder than anything she imagined. It hit me like a blow I didn't see coming. The photograph was on my phone, clear as day, undeniable. Her laughing, leaning into him, her hand brushing against his arm with a familiarity that made my chest tighten. She wasn't just fascinated by him anymore. She had crossed the line I never imagined she would. I stared at that image, my heart pounding, my mind spinning, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink to the size of that frame. Every word she had said, every excuse, every just friends, all lies. She was betraying me, and she thought she was untouchable. Anger surged first, a wild, hot wave that made my hands tremble. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand the truth, but I forced myself to pause. I couldn't let her see the storm inside me, not yet. I needed to understand the depth of it, to feel the full weight of her betrayal before anything else. And then it hit me, the mansion. The luxurious world she had fallen for wasn't his, it was mine. Every chandelier, every polished surface, every lavish detail she admired belonged to me. The irony was sharp, almost delicious in its cruelty. She had been dreaming in my house, wrapped in someone else's illusion, while I watched silently. I remember the moment of clarity, the precise instant when anger turned into a calm, calculating fire. I realized that I had a choice: react with chaos and risk losing myself, or wait, let the betrayal play out, and deliver justice on my terms. I chose patience. I chose control. Every delayed message, every stolen glance she shared with him, every tiny thrill she felt, it all became a part of the story I was writing, though she had no idea I held the pen. There was a strange, cold satisfaction in that awareness. She believed she was winning, floating in a world of glitter and charm. But she was blind to the fact that I had already seen everything. I wasn't powerless. I was everywhere, silent, patient, and observant. And in that silence, I began to imagine how it would end. I began to plan, not out of vengeance for anger's sake, but for balance, for the inevitability of karma. She had chosen her path, and soon the consequences would follow. The mansion she adored, the billionaire she desired, the world she thought was untouchable, they were all pieces in the game I now controlled. I didn't act immediately. That would have been too easy, too predictable. Revenge, I had learned, is an art requires patience, precision, and a mind steady enough to watch the world betray itself. Every smile she gave him, every subtle touch, every laugh that wasn't mine to share, I recorded in my mind, storing it like evidence for the moment it would matter most. She thought she was free, floating in a bubble of luxury and charm. But I was already inside her world, invisible, untouchable, and fully in control. I started small. A missed message here, a carefully timed delivery there. Little things that seemed coincidental, harmless, insignificant, but that nudged the illusion she cherished ever so slightly. I manipulated situations in ways she would never notice, ensuring Lucian arrived at the wrong time. Subtly shifting details in the mansion that made her sense something wasn't right. She didn't suspect me. She thought the world was moving around her, but in reality, every step, every heartbeat, every sigh of hers was leading directly into my plan. Watching her, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. I wasn't cruel. This wasn't about punishment. It was about justice. She had chosen her path, chosen the thrill of another man's world over the life she had beside me, and now she would see in the sharpest clarity the consequences of that choice. I let her believe she was untouchable. I let her enjoy her fantasy. And all the while, I prepared to reveal the truth in a way that would hit harder than any argument, any confrontation could. Every interaction became a chess move. Every whispered secret she shared with him, every look she cast toward the glittering chandeliers, I turned into strategy. I didn't rush. I observed. I calculated. I let the tension build, letting her fall deeper into the illusion. Knowing that when the reveal came, the betrayal she had committed would crash around her with the weight it deserved. There's a quiet power in knowing the truth while others stumble blindly. It's a heady sensation, the calm within the storm, the predator watching the prey unaware. And in that calm I felt a thrilling certainty. The moment of reckoning was approaching. Soon, all the deception, all the glamour, all the false security would collapse. And she, Lyra Thorne, and her billionaire fantasy would finally understand that some games can only be played when you know the rules and I held them all. The moment finally arrived. I didn't storm in. I didn't shout. I walked quietly into the mansion, into the world she thought she owned with him. And for the first time, the illusion began to crack. She was laughing, leaning into him just as she always had, completely unaware that I was standing there, calm, collected, holding the invisible power that had been mine all along. The silence was heavy, thick with tension, and I let it stretch, savoring every second before the storm broke. Kaylin. Her voice trembled when she finally noticed me, and in that moment I saw guilt flicker in her eyes, quick and fleeting. He turned slowly, a smirk still on his face, unaware that the ground beneath him was not his to command. I could feel the room pulse with the energy of revelation. The betrayal, the excitement, the thrill she thought she'd found all, collided into a moment of raw clarity. I stepped forward, measured, deliberate. Every movement carried authority. Every word I spoke was a blade. "You were dreaming in my house?" I said quietly, letting the words sink in. "Every chandelier, every hall, every corner you thought was his, belonged to me." The shock in her eyes was instantaneous. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Lucian's smirk faltered, confusion flickering across his features. He had thought this was his stage, his world. He had no idea the true owner was standing in the shadows, silently orchestrating their fall. Her guilt surged, a wave crashing over her. I didn't, she stammered, but it was too late. Every glance, every touch, every whisper of betrayal she had offered was laid bare in that room. Anger and humiliation twisted across Lucien's face as the realization hit him. He had been playing a role on a stage he didn't own. And I, patient and controlled, finally allowed the tension to erupt. My voice rose, not in desperation, but in finality, delivering the truth she had refused to see. There was a pause, electric, as the weight of betrayal pressed down. Lyra looked at me, shame and fear in equal measure. Lucien's confidence shattered, and in that split second, the karma I had promised was fully realized. No screaming, no chaos, just undeniable truth, undeniable ownership, and the power of quiet patience. The mansion, the glittering fantasy she adored, had revealed its true master, and in that revelation, the story of betrayal met the story of justice, perfectly aligned. The room was heavy with silence after the confrontation, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of truth, full of consequences, full of realization. Lyra's face, once lit with fascination and desire, was now pale with regret. She looked at me not with anger, but with the quiet shock of someone who had finally understood the depth of her mistakes. Lucien, once untouchable in his charm, now stood exposed. Stripped of the illusions he had built, realizing far too late that the stage he thought he controlled had always belonged to me. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The power was in the calm, in the quiet certainty that justice had been served. Lyra's choices had led her here, to the breaking point she had refused to see, and now she had to face the truth. No excuses, no empty promises, just the weight of her own actions. And Lucien. Karma has a way of humbling even the most arrogant, and he felt it in the sharpest, most personal way imaginable. He wasn't destroyed, not entirely, but he was exposed, vulnerable, and painfully aware of the illusion he had relied on. I walked through the mansion afterward, the echo of my footsteps, a reminder of control regained. Every corner, every chandelier, every polished surface reminded me that this world, the life she had wanted to claim for herself elsewhere, was mine. But the real satisfaction came from the lessons learned, the clarity earned, the balance restored. Betrayal had a price, and she had paid it in full. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about seeing the scales tip back toward justice, letting the truth be the loudest voice in the room. I didn't need to punish her with cruelty or force. Life did that. Watching them confront reality, watching the fantasy crumble, was enough. There's a strange peace in knowing that karma doesn't forget, that patience can be more powerful than anger, that control is most potent when exercised silently. I had been patient. I had been observant. And now the storm had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. As I left the mansion that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks' freedom. Lyra and Lucien would carry their lessons with them. But I carried mine too. Love is fragile, trust is sacred, and sometimes the quietest presence can hold the most power. Karma doesn't need to shout. It simply arrives, and it never forgets. Walking away from the mansion that night, I felt a strange kind of silence settle over Mia. Silence heavy with lessons learned and truths revealed. It wasn't triumph in the way most people imagine triumph. It wasn't about gloating or watching them suffer. It was the calm, steady satisfaction of knowing balance had been restored. That betrayal had met its consequence, and that patience had been far more powerful than rage. The mansion behind me gleamed under the moonlight, untouched by chaos. A silent testament to what had been mine all along, and what had been foolishly desired by those who never truly understood it. I thought about Lyra, about how easily she had been swayed by glitter and charm, by illusions of wealth and power. And I thought about Lucien, whose confidence had blinded him to the truth that the world he flaunted belonged to someone else entirely. Both had underestimated the quiet observer, the one who knew, the one who waited. Watching them face reality, watching the pride and fantasy crumble around them, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. It wasn't joy. It was recognition. Recognition that life has a way of teaching lessons, often in the most dramatic, unavoidable ways. I realized in that stillness how fragile trust really is. How love can be tested not by absence, but by desire, distraction, and the lure of what seems just out of reach. Betrayal leaves scars, yes, but it also carves clarity. It sharpens the mind, strengthens the heart, and teaches patience in ways no easy lesson ever could. Karma, I understood fully then, is not a force you invoke, it is a force you respect. It is quiet, relentless, and unerring. It doesn't scream. It doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives with precision at the exact moment the lesson is needed most. And as I walked away, the cool night air brushing against my face, I felt an unexpected lightness. Not because they had suffered, not because the world had tilted in my favor, but because I had survived the storm of betrayal without losing myself, without letting anger dictate my actions. I had reclaimed not just my space, my possessions, or my pride, but my peace. And that, I realized, was the most powerful victory of all. Sometimes, the quietest presence carries the deepest power. Sometimes, the one who waits, who observes, who trusts in the inevitability of justice, holds the world in their hands without ever raising them. And in that truth, I found my closure, my calm, and my freedom.